Hello and welcome to the Younger Theatre in Isolation series. I'm Sam Nicholls and I'm here with the fantastic Scott Graham. Scott, I don't imagine there'll be many people watching this who don't know who you are, but just in case, do you mind doing a quick introduction of who you are and who Frantic Assembly is?
Sure. I'm Scott Graham. I'm the co-founder and artistic director of Frantic Assembly, and we are a company, a theatre company. We've been going for over 25 years. I think a lot of people talk about the work as being physical theatre. That's fine. It's a problematic term,
Mhm.
but
Mm.
it's also fairly accurate.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you just mentioned it there, but last year was your 25th anniversary. And in that time, you've done over 28 productions, worked in 30 countries. You've done many celebrated productions, such as A Curious Case of a Dog in the Nighttime, Things I Know to Be True, and a really great production of Othello that I saw and loved. But you've mentioned in the past that you find the devising process sometimes quite difficult. Do you mind just expanding on that? After 25 years, do you still find it sometimes difficult to get it on stage?
It's not difficult to get it on stage. It could become easier. I haven't done it for
Yeah.
25 years. It could be very easy because I know what to do. It's
Yeah.
it's how to keep it interesting, how to
Mm.
keep it challenging and of a standard. And it's not even a case of it being of a standard because I don't know. It felt to me that the learning curve and start of the company was fairly steep, but
Mm.
the further I got on, the steeper it got because you
Oh,
would challenge
wow.
yourself more and more, and that felt particularly healthy. And um, I saw that in other artists and practitioners. I'm working on Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, just how much Marianne was pushing herself, and all the other creatives were as well. So there was never a sense that anybody was resting on their laurels, and I thought that was a great example.
Mm.
So it gets hard because I make it hard, um, and I think it's because I like to set different challenges.
Mm.
I'm in a really lucky position being the artistic director of this company in that if I want to make a show of a certain type, I can.
Mhm.
And when I do that, I'm probably itching to make a show of a different type, and I can. But they come with their own challenges. I think there is a scenario where after 25 years, you could just do what you know.
Mhm.
Um, and then everything would be nice and smooth. There are times it does cross my mind that maybe that's what I should do. But I think it's probably less interesting. And it can lead to a kind of dead theatre as well, I think.
No, of course. But on that note of you talking about, people almost expecting a certain thing from you, you've talked about, how sometimes people discuss it as a physical theatre company, whilst that's not totally accurate. It works. Um, a lot of the times, there's a really great quote I found that says, "There's an abundance of really bad Frantic Assembly style student productions out there." So there's obviously an opinion out there that Frantic Assembly shows are of one thing and that thing can be emulated. And because of that, that's built up over time. Do you sometimes feel that pressure then to just make a Frantic Assembly show, make it physical theatre? Or do you think part of being a company that pushes itself is to differentiate and, go against the group, if you like?
I think I think first of all the physical approach comes from a fascination at what physicality can do, about what movement can do, but also even then movement is I consider movement to be really problematic as well because movement isn't the act of moving as far as I'm concerned. It's the concept in the mind of the audience. It's the concept of action. And actually all you have to do is put the possibility of that movement in the mind of the audience, and they become absolutely intrigued as to whether the movement will happen. Um, it's like a kiss on stage. If you show people who are aching to kiss on stage, everybody's electrified about this moment, but the moment they do it, it's possibly gone. So
The kiss is
you
gone.
really
Yeah,
have,
of course.
yeah. So it's the same with movement. It's not just about being seen to move. It's
Hmm.
about trying to tell stories through that ache and tension and stillness and precision in the end. so there was a fascination there that might have come from my sports background anyway, or maybe I just connected with it. Early on, I remember seeing films made by DV8, and
Yeah.
they just blew my mind. I didn't know theatre or dance could be like that. So there was that connection straight away. But I think that there is a pressure to be a physical theatre company. And in the most recent show I've made, I Think We're Alone, I wanted to explore stillness, and I wanted to set the walls to do pretty much all of the movement. And yet I still had, there were responses there. It wasn't physical enough, but I reserve the right to explore that kind of physicality, especially when the show is about emotional and physical isolation. The notion that there are lots of bad Frantic Assembly rip-offs or homages,
a polite version of a rip-off. Yeah.
Well, I think we're just as guilty as anybody else is doing that. That's what I mean. You've got to, as a company, you've got to innovate. You've got to keep changing. Otherwise, you do just do bad versions of your own work. A friend of mine told me about a stand-up comedian who was presenting a show in Edinburgh, and he saw one of his kind of stand-up rivals in the front row with a notepad, and he said to him, "Oh yeah, you here taking notes?" And the guy in the front row said, "No, I'm just ticking them off." And it was a brilliant put down. He just crushed him. But it's really telling. You don't want your audience to turn up and just tick off the moments they know are going to be, given to them.
No, exactly.
So go back to the student productions. I'm immensely proud of that, really, because I don't think it's about copying. Even if they are copying, the main thing is that they're getting up and doing it. I wanted theatre to be accessible. I wanted it to be something that people felt they could do and be part of, and not just a hobby of people who can afford to do it or who are connected to get into the business. And I think even if it's a bad version, a bad copy of what they think something is, the fact that they're getting up and doing it is the most important thing, because that's how you learn. You do learn from your mistakes. And even then, if they think it's brilliant, that's fine. Their taste will evolve and change, and I don't have a problem with it.
No, fantastic.
Lynn Gardner said years ago that she thought Frantic Assembly were like a punk band, and or punk theatre makers, and a friend of mine at the time said, "No, you're not. You're not as noisy as this person. You're not as kind of outrageous or full of anger as that person." And I said, "No, you're missing the point. What Lynn Gardner means by punk is that ethos where people who couldn't play the guitar just picked it up and made a noise because they felt they could. They weren't going to be defined by anybody else. They were going to get up there and thrash and make their own sound." And I thought that was quite astute of Lynn Gardner. I thought she hit the nail on the head. And actually, for every bad version there is, I'm just really pleased that there are people giving it a go and feel that they can, because it's accessible.
Speaking on that idea of accessibility then, and of Lynn Gardner, you had an interview with her in February of this year, and you talked about, where Frantic Assembly came from, and also about the conditions that led to, Frantic Assembly achieving what it's achieved. And there was a really great quote you said. It was, "It feels wrong to say that someone from my background would struggle to set up a Frantic Assembly today. But if it was me, coming from the background that I came from, it would be really hard to justify the risks we took back then." Could you expand on this? Do you think that we are getting to a stage where it would be difficult and the accessibility of theatre is becoming more strained than ever?
It seems like that from my perspective, but I've got to say that my perspective is of someone who's been running a company for 25 years, not who's starting it today.
Of course.
And I said that in that interview because looking back then, our education was free, nearly free. you know, and I managed to accrue very little debt because I was working during the summer to pay off whatever debts were coming up. And we started the company as a small business, and we could do that through what was called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, which meant we were on the dole for a while and then started with nothing. But we could do that because the cost of living was so low. And we were in Swansea where the cost of living was lower. And the cost of living was lower, but the quality of life was higher because we were, you know, easily distracted by the beach. Didn't matter that we didn't have any money. And I just worry about people trying to do that in London, for example. It would seem impossible. In most of our major cities, it would seem very, very difficult. And there is such a need for people to be paying off debts. Can they actually put themselves in this position where for the first few years we were living in abject poverty?
Wow.
We have not been able to pay off anything really because we had no money. And we did that because we were three friends who committed to each other and to the project. I'm not saying there aren't those people around, but I just think the environment has changed massively.
Of course.
So I hope I'm wrong. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, it does look really difficult.
No, you're right. And I think the metric of what makes a successful theatre show nowadays for like starting emerging companies have changed. I was at the Fringe last year, and the idea of a successful show was a show that managed to break even, or a show that managed to accrue like a certain percentage of fill in the audience. You know, it's no longer a case of, oh, they made something great. It's a case of, all right, can they make another thing because they've paid off this thing?
To be honest, I think it was always the same. I think that pressure was there back in the day as well. I think it's more the other pressures around that, you know, the accrued debt from student life, the cost of living, the need to get a job on the side of what you're doing, because that's what we didn't do. We committed to the one thing.
Oh, wow.
So we were all in the same boat, and I think that worked well for us. But that's a personal choice. Those people might still be making those personal choices now.
No.
I just worry about it differently, I think, because I'm obviously a lot older and I'm a dad, and I worry about how my kids, you know, emerge into this world.
No, of course.
Yeah, it's just a tricky one. I don't have the answers, and I don't mean to be deliberately pessimistic. That's why I was a little bit worried about the statement. But I recognise there are greater challenges now than there were then, I think.
No, but even if there are challenges, you know, theatre companies are putting stuff out there, which is my not so subtle segue to talk about Frantic Digital. Like a lot of theatre companies and venues during this lockdown period, Frantic Assembly have been working to make sure there is stuff out there. And for Frantic Assembly, this took the form of Frantic Digital, which aims to share insights into the creative and rehearsal process through frantic flashbacks, offer practical creative tasks with Frantic Create, and lead fun production-related warm-ups that can all be safely tried at home. The first example up is your 2010 production of Beautiful Burnout, and the discussion and exploration around this production has been fantastic. You've talked about the beginnings and the seeds of the production. You interviewed Maggie Ann Bain, who was in the original cast, and Simon Pittman, a Frantic Assembly associate, has led a warm-up and led a creative task around the production to get people involved. So it's pretty clear that Frantic Digital is far more ambitious and all-encompassing than perhaps just putting past productions online. Where did the idea come from to do something as this?
Yeah. Well, when everything shut down, there was, you know, a bit of panic, a bit of blind panic, and then people responded very, very quickly. And then I just thought this is going to lead to saturation. Well, we all thought that within the company. We were just a bit like, whoa, hold on. Let's just work out what our offer is, work out what we've got, how we respond, what our values are, how do we protect them, and how do we enable the people that we're committed to enabling? So it took a few weeks to just have a think about it. We're not in a position where we can just put our old shows out there. We, I don't know how people do it because it's a rights minefield.
No, of course.
So we're not in that position to do that at the moment. But I thought there's other ways that we can take those plays apart and give people access to them. In fact, if we do it in a different way, we're not necessarily saturating the market, and we're not asking people to sit down for an hour and a half in front of what's going to be a pretty potentially disappointing version of a live stage show. Not all recordings work.
No.
And not all shows lend themselves to being captured in that way as well. So I wanted to get inside the productions and offer a greater insight. And also I wanted that to be personal, and I wanted it to be focused on little things, because it wasn't a case of just throwing the material out there. I wanted to keep a dialogue going. I wanted people to hear our voice and to feel like we were connecting with people. So that's why, the first video was just filmed in my attic. That's why it's about just talking to the camera. That's why it's about a very personal response. Because I think Frantic Assembly's connection to teachers, students, actors, academics, and practitioners is genuine. I think there is a very important connection between us all. And it was the word connection that kept coming back to my mind about what Frantic Digital should be, rather than just fill the space. It's not get out there. It's about connection. So how could we connect? And I think that's all about what you offer, how personal that is, the tone of voice, how you might engage someone physically and mentally, but ultimately it's about what they take on after it, because all of Frantic Assembly's learn and train work has been about enabling the participant.
Of course.
It's not just about taking teachers and students through the themes of the play. It's not that. It's about how it was made, because ultimately we want them to be using it in their own work, or to feel inspired to create their own work, which comes back to the bad versions of Frantic Assembly shows. And that's why we don't feel bad about them. We love them.
That's a step in the right direction. That's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so, speaking on the idea of like working with students and teachers, I know you spoke in the past about how gratifying you find leading workshops as part of Frantic Assembly. You said most people expect an audience to buy a ticket and see a show and then maybe take it further by doing a workshop. We did it back to front, and it created an audience for us. If by sharing what we do, we have demystified theatre and made people feel they can do it too, then we have done our job. Yeah. Frantic Flashbacks and Frantic creates an extension of this then, breaking down and investigating the building blocks of a production, rather than just, here's the final thing. Sorry if you miss parts because it's on a tripod at the back of a audience. Exactly, because we know that a lot of our audience do want to know how it was made, not just consume it as a piece of TV. So it's important to open up those workings and explain them, because I think, excuse me, there is so much about theatre that, or any kind of entertainment, once it's framed, you just, I don't know, I think you fall into the story and you forget about it being mechanics and nuts and bolts. Yeah. So you don't necessarily understand or in the best place to understand how it was made. So lifting the lid on all of that seems quite important, because otherwise you are inadvertently remystifying the of course. Because it looks all finished and polished and perfect.
Yeah. And what I wanted to do through Frantic Digital and through any kind of interaction and resource packs as well is show that is to show moments of inspiration,
Mm.
where ideas come from, where ideas fail, where ideas are resurrected, and all those little happy accidents that add up to a show. Because I don't think our education system is quite set up to understand that, because it can't take the risk with its students. Students are expected to understand the process and to be able to apply their thoughts. And then, like a good scientist, they can show the results. Whereas creative theatre isn't often that way. It's the other way around a lot of the time. And I think that's really important, that each of these films is an opportunity to show just that, a little bit of the way how it works. The other thing about Frantic Digital and everyone else, or a lot of other people's response, is just to throw the work out there. I think politically, that's quite a dodgy, problematic thing to do. It's a great offer, it's a great gift to give out, but you're doing it at a time when all of the freelancers who made that show are without work and without pay.
Of course.
So you might even be asking them to waive their rights so that you could offer it for free. Ideologically, I'm not particularly easy with that.
No.
I'd love to be able to show and share more of the work, but actually, I think Frantic Digital is about the future. It's not about filling a space at this present time. This is a very good time to start it, but it's got to continue. It starts as a retrospective, which is fine, but it's very quickly, it's got to become about the now, so that we can start to make work digitally, new work digitally, which will again be taken apart, and so people could see the workings. It might be that we have to work out a whole education package as well digitally, but we can't just give that away. I think there is a misconception about a digital offering, that it's just, well, if it's digital, it's free, we give it away. We have to make sure that the practitioners and the creative team that make the shows can actually continue there to make a living. Otherwise, those shows don't exist. I think it's a bad narrative to suggest that theatre can be given away, especially at the time when we're trying to state the importance of the arts in the fabric of our community, because we're going to need funding, as everyone will. We're going to need support. It's a dodgy narrative to show that we're just happy to get up there and perform for anybody. It's a business. It's a hugely important business within the UK. It's one that we possibly lead the world on, and we should recognise it as such and be very, very careful about that narrative, because it possibly devalues the business. And even using the word business sounds wrong, because we don't tend to use it within the arts, and it's wrong. We've got to talk about it as such. That doesn't mean that we're all, hard-headed businessmen. I'm talking from the point of view of a charity. Frantic Assembly is a charity, but it's got to look after the pounds and pennies so that it can continue as a charity and fulfill its charitable remit. So we have to look after ourselves, and we have to look after the people that work with us, for us, and around us. So, it's great that everyone's offered their work and got it out there, but we just got to be careful as well. And actually, we need to start building models for the future rather than just for this present.
Is that something that you're looking forward to doing then? Let's say the lockdown finally gets lifted. Are you hoping to keep Frantic Digital as something that will be operating and that will be generating, future-looking productions, moving past retrospective?
Absolutely. Frantic Digital will continue. It's got to continue.
Fantastic.
And we'll have to keep working out what form that is, because it needs to be relevant. I think just creating something to fill this space now, while it does serve a need and I consider that need to be teachers and students.
Mm.
Of course, people want to see the work, but I think the disruption to the education sector and our relationship with the education sector is certainly one that we should be doing something to help provide stuff for. But I think there is a presumption around the idea of when the lockdown ends. What are we going to emerge to? We don't know. We don't know how that's going to come about. We don't know what we're going to walk out to. Theatre at the best of times is a house of cards. We're all reliant on each other. So if one element falls, the rest can fall. So we need to be thinking about future models. And I think that's what everybody needs to be doing. And probably that's what people are quietly doing behind the scenes.
That's fantastic. I mean, on that note, then a big part of Frantic Assembly has been making sure new voices and fresh perspectives are, present in your work and indeed present in the arts industry as a whole. You've talked about how just now workshops are so important because you bring people in, you go into schools and you engage people who perhaps typically aren't involved in the arts or don't see the arts as a world for them. What steps do you think supporting institutions and theatre companies like Frantic Assembly should be doing moving forward to make sure these new voices and these fresh perspectives aren't lost? And, what impact do you think in general COVID-19 is going to have on their ability to emerge?
I think you've got to encourage creativity.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to give a platform where creativity feels like an easy step forward rather than a huge leap.
Yeah, of course.
I think digital platforms can be a very important way of doing that. But as ever, I think the tone of the offer is incredibly important, because if someone feels that the arts aren't for them, then they're not going to answer the door to the arts when it rings the bell.
Mm.
So you need to be very careful about that. I just think we've got to take a look at all the presumptions we make about theatre and about the return to the norm, because I think it'll be a long time before potentially we return to that. We might never return to that. How will an audience feel sitting in a theatre once one person starts coughing?
Yeah.
How will an audience feel when an actor doing a huge soliloquy at the front starts kind of spitting saliva everywhere? What will they really be thinking when two actors are rolling around with each other in a love scene? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Will you get distracted because COVID-19 is still...
You're thinking to yourself, that's not 2 meters. That's not a safe self-isolation.
Yeah. And, we'll get criticism for that. We're getting criticism on Instagram for posting images of people who are touching, images that were taken in July. Now,
wow.
Yeah, that's because some people are really, really stupid. But it's in the air.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. A lot of people don't have to actually say it. They'll still be thinking it. So they're distracted. And then they're thinking about this social construct where we're all sitting, all these strangers are sitting here in this sweaty, unventilated
room. Yeah.
Yeah, workshops. Will people want to do workshops, sweating with strangers? I mean, I hope so. I hope people are kind of itching to do that again. But, as they walk through the door, they're probably having hand sanitizer on from somebody wearing a mask, which again changes their mind before they start watching theatre. So I think the notion of norm is a long way off. But I think we need to be thinking about all those little changes that could actually have a profound effect on the theatre experience. I don't have those answers. That's what we need to do.
No. Perhaps it was a bit disingenuous for me asking you for like a laundry list of individual steps we could take in order to achieve normality again. But that's so right. The idea of normality within theatre is shifting. I mean, I think we all see the economy is perhaps struggling under COVID-19, and who knows what the end result's going to be, how that's going to have a knock-on effect on the arts and the arts industry. Um, bringing back perhaps a more personal example for you, I know your production of I Think We Were Alone, which you were co-directing with Kathy Burke, unfortunately had to be cut short, and had its tour dates, cut down. Um, I suppose a question in two parts then. Are there any plans to bring back I Think We Were Alone in any stage moving forward? And how does it feel? I suppose we talk a lot about, productions getting shut down, but I suppose a lot of people watching this won't know the feeling of working harder in production and then not being able to perform or share it.
I think when the call came, I think the government announced an advisory not to go to the theatre, and which was a very badly worded but carefully worded statement. That night we made the call to stop it, to cancel it, and I think most people did as well because they saw, what was coming. And for me, it just made sense. It's a very small event in a very big world event. So it didn't feel, I didn't feel a great sense of injustice because my production had been pulled. It just felt like the most obvious thing to do. I think for the actors, I know some of the actors, it was quite difficult because they got the news about an hour before they were going on stage. And what they had to process was, I've already given my last performance. Whereas so much of an actor's process is about learning from the night before and applying it the next night. A good actor, anyway. I think they were already thinking about what they learned from yesterday that they were going to apply today, and then never got the chance. So it's like not being able to say goodbye to a person you know. Oh. That person being your character, So in terms of plans to bring it back, I think there are no plans. Everything's built on sound at the moment. So it's very hard to plan. What we do have is a show that's ready to come back and fill a space, but we don't know whether theatres can buy in outside work. We don't know whether touring theatre will happen. And again, I don't want to sound overly pessimistic,
no, but
we have to consider all of those options. So it would be very naive for me to say, yeah, we're planning to bring it back on a certain date.
Yeah.
All I do know is that we are planning new productions. We've got, and when I say planning, I mean we have ideas.
Yeah. So it's informative stages.
Yeah, and we'll be looking to, as soon as we can, start to build on those. What we can't say for sure is the state of any of our partners to actually host productions. Touring theatre is the ultimate house of cards. It just, we've had this happen with several shows, actually, several tours that have been set up and one venue's pulled out and everything's collapsed. So the whole project goes away.
Goodness, that must be, or I suppose for, there's a lot of talk about Frantic Assembly being, it's not just you, it's not just Scott Graham, the production, it's you work with a team, it's about bringing people on board, making sure your associates can get work, making sure there's the opportunity to bring, new voices in. That must be rather stressful from your perspective then, not knowing any sort of hard factual figures which would allow you to plan or allow you to begin to get the circle moving again. That must be rather stressful.
It is, but it's so obviously the only scenario we can deal with at the moment. It's a bit like, well, what can you do? For me, it's a little bit like Frantic Digital. I want us to be in the best place Frantic Assembly can possibly be when we do emerge from this, so that we are the first company people come calling on, so that our practitioners are getting work from schools and colleges, because we are the first company they're coming calling. It's about keeping that dialogue going.
Yeah.
Because we have 20 practitioners that we've trained and are training in very different stages of experience. And their lives were turned upside down on that day that we all shut down. And they get no income. It's what they do. That's how fragile their situation is. So
Yeah.
I want us to be able to help. I want us to have a viable industry that they can work within.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we all need to be proactive about that and not assume anything. We
Yeah,
need to make ourselves really strong for whatever's coming.
of course, because it's impossible to know what perhaps is coming. On a more positive note, then, we've seen a lot of people. I'm not sure if you saw, but there's a lot of people out there still creating. Something that a younger theatre looked at recently is the Coronavirus Theatre Club, which is it began as a Twitter page of matching together directors, writers, and actors to perform monologues to the screen. And whilst it's difficult to know, is this theatre because it's written for theatre, but it's being performed virtually and will likely only remain virtually. At least it is keeping the conversation going. Have you seen, in your experience, any great examples of the conversation keeping going, like similar to Frantic Digital out there?
Um, Not so much within the theatre world. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't uh, dug particularly deeply in that. But I don't know whether you're finding the same, but the quality of meme on your WhatsApp and all that is very high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm not being facetious here. It just reminds me how creative people are.
Mm, mm.
And, that just gives me hope. And I think what you're talking about as well is great. That model might continue or it might not. But what you have is
Who knows?
people who are still cutting their teeth on something. They're
Yeah.
still trying to remain sharp. And that's really important. And we're trying to do that with our practitioners as well, who've all responded to the situation in very different ways, very personal ways, as is right and understandable. But all we can do is gently offer something that they can engage with creatively, because I think it's keeping that part of the mind sharp that's really important. Because, as you say, on a more positive note,
Mm-hmm.
creativity and positivity are so close. So I think there is a lot of positivity around. And I don't mean to be, as I said, facetious by pointing to WhatsApp and things like that. I don't know. I just think
Exactly.
that's great. Somebody's made that. That's brilliant.
We are in a bit of a renaissance for memes at the moment.
Yeah,
I wake up, my friends group chat full of, sometimes quite dark, but oftentimes very, very funny
yeah,
reflections of the modern time.
yeah.
Perhaps then, on that note, of like taking it away from theatre for a second, is there something you'd recommend viewers and listeners out there perhaps do every day? It doesn't have to be theatrical. It could be go for a walk as long as you're 2 meters away from everyone else. But in order to keep that positivity and that sense of, we're not just spinning in circles. Is there anything you'd recommend to people out there?
Um, One of the first things I point out is that I'm a huge hypocrite, and I found that out
Uh-huh.
yesterday, because a lot of people have been wondering what to do, but
Mm-hmm.
with Frantic Digital and just making the company respond to the situation, myself and my chief exec, Kerry Whelan, we've been working very hard.
Yeah.
In fact, harder than normal. So quite strange. But the Easter bank holiday was one where I had to really adjust to trying to do nothing.
Mm.
I struggled massively. And then I just went out for a walk with my daughter, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day. And we just walked around locally and just saw things we hadn't seen, and everything looked glorious. And we also just talked,
Mm.
and it was beautiful. It was absolutely brilliant. And the two of us returned much more positive, much more open and engaged. And I'm stating the obvious, but the most important thing I'm actually saying is that it took me that moment to recognize that I wasn't doing it, that I was under a lot of pressure. I
Yeah.
put myself under a lot of pressure. Same with
Mm.
Kerry. And we were both finding it very hard to emerge from that pressure. I think the pressure can manifest in very different things. For me, it was my work.
Mm.
For others, it's where's the money going to come from? But from others, it could be, how do I respond creatively to this crisis? It's still a pressure.
Mm.
So there are days for sitting and staring at a wall. There are days for getting out and walking among the blossom. There are days for writing the novel,
Mm.
days for painting that portrait. I
At
think as
least
long
things
as you,
that you're getting through at the moment.
yeah, well, I think it's important just to remember that there is that variety,
Mm.
and that variety can be really useful, because otherwise, our positive response, what we thought was a positive response, is actually just a pressure that we've put upon ourselves, and just becomes another crushing weight. And actually, you just need to get away from that sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen, but there's a few tweets out there that says if you don't emerge from the lockdown with, a new side gig, a new job opportunity, and a six pack, then you've wasted this entire 12-week process. And it can't be further from the truth. We just gotta, make sure we're looking after ourselves more than anything. I suppose in this time more than any other time is making sure we're okay health wise.
Yeah, yeah, well, and each other as well, because
Hmm.
there's been some really lovely uh, responses to this. People are. I noticed this from a walk yesterday. People are saying hello on the street, and just a kind of a little nod of recognition that we're all in the same situation. And I think we all walked around the street before this and didn't make eye contact because we presumed we were different from each other.
Yeah.
This now, we're looking for eye contact and speaking to each other because we know we're the same. So little things like that are worth holding on to
Hmm.
as a community. And again, what made us look towards each other, what made us smile or nod or say hello, was connection. So whatever form that takes, I think that's still the word that keeps coming back to me
Hmm.
as really important.
I suppose that's so true. I think luckily, we have stuff like Frantic Digital out there. Shows there is still the opportunity to connect and create. Now, luckily, we do have companies like Frantic Assembly out there who are offering those connections. Um, Thank you so much for speaking to a younger theatre today, Scott. It
That's a
has been
pleasure.
lovely that we've had some pessimistic times, we've had some optimistic times. But yeah, thank you so much. For people watching, there's other discussions on our YouTube page and on our website. There's one with Simon Stevens, which is a lot of fun. A lot of similar themes coming up
That's
than what
good
came up
value.
today.
That's good value, Simon.
I think we're all like circling the same boat at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Sam.